Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Indie Insights and Innovations and our very, very special guests at oOh Media today. They're going to be talking all things oOh. We've got the amazing, the myth, the legend of Tim. Ali and Georgie are going to be joining as well. And the presentation's going to be called We Are oOh. I'll give you one guess around what the presentation is about. But without further ado, I'll let Tim present it with a little more eloquence. Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Presented with more eloquence. I think it's a little bit hard to outdo you when it comes to that, but I'll certainly try my best. Yes, welcome everyone to our We Are oOh session today. It is what it says on the tin. It is very much a on one hand, an introductory to who we are and what we do, but we will actually have a little bit more of a skew today around our digital piece, our digital offering, and digital trading. Because let's face it, most of the people on the call know who we are and what we do. We are a large out-of-home business with many large rectangles on the sides of the road and in many other places as well, which we'll get into. But before I do that, I would like to start with an acknowledgement of our traditional owners of the land where Georgie and I are today, that being the Camaragal people. We also do pay our respects to elders past and present for all the lands where you may be seeing this presentation today. We also wanted to share with you as well this beautiful artwork that we see on screen, which oOh had commissioned as one small part of our wrap plan. This artwork was by a local artist by the name of Lua Pellegrini. This piece of work here represents the 6 major circles there represent our 6 major corporate offices. The other circles around those pieces represent the other offices and depots that we have across Australia and New Zealand, all interconnected by the land and the sea as well. So I'd like to share with you today, firstly, who is in the room. Yes, Sam, thank you for the introduction. For those who I haven't met, my name is Tim Elder. I'm head of sales for Indies and direct customers. I'm joined from our Melbourne office by Ali Henthorne, our head of strategic client solutions. And here with me in the room today is Georgie Fox, our head of digital sales. Now, I'm going to be passing on to these two experts in due course. But to start with, we're going to start to talk about really sort of the changes that are happening across our industry. It really feels like these last couple of weeks, change which is always part of our industry. I think the last couple of weeks, it really feels like that change has been accelerating. Change has been impacting all of us in many, many different ways. But out of home, we certainly see change as very much a positive, and it's very much something in our world that's led by innovation, as it says here on the screen. Innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity and not a threat. And we really see this being manifesting itself in many different ways across not just our business, but across the sector. Firstly, from the point of view of creativity, 3D creativity and 3D displays has been pretty much our major piece of clickbait over the last 12 to 18 months. This example here, which has really well and truly done the rounds of Samsung's Galaxy launch, which they really showcased their creative here in Times Square in New York around about 12 months ago, really showing a leap forward in the capability that we have from a creative point of view. But what's important to note here is that these capabilities are not something that's only available in lands distant, far, far and away. They're also very much manifesting themselves here locally. The next example that we've got is one of our own assets that we have over in Western Australia in Yagan Square. I'll pause because of the sound. Thank you, Ali. Extending on from the creative piece, I'll click through to make sure I'm on the right slide here, is very much looking at, we've showcased there 2 very, very big examples. It also manifests itself on smaller scale as well. As you can see here from this succulent cheese toasty on your screen, This is an example of a really, really quite a straightforward but beautiful image. But the innovation that's coming in here is that it's being triggered by specific conditions. In this case, the right weather conditions, the right temperature conditions that are happening at that point where that asset is at that right time to make it, to bring that innovation, to bring that creative, to really build the strength in the creative that's being delivered at that point in time. Now, as we move ahead here, really where we're sort of starting to see innovation is really tipping into how it's really feeding the rise of the out-of-home sector. Now, we're seeing the growth in the sector very much in things like the natural growth in audience as seen by the growth in population. We're seeing that innovation in terms of investment in infrastructure, which is seeing a real uplift in the quality of product that we have in the ground, which helps us frame and shape the messaging of you and your brands even better than before. We're also seeing in the structural decline that we're seeing in the TV market as well, which in itself is presenting an opportunity in audience uplift for us across the sector in totality. Now, there are 4 key trends that are really driving this growth in out-of-home as far as what we're seeing. We're putting them into these 4 buckets of, firstly, fame, which is brands wanting their moment in the sun in a very cost-efficient way. We're seeing it in automation, which is really highlighted by the rise in programmatic trading, which George is going to very much touch on in a second. We're seeing it in the rise of attribution and our ability to be able to plan, buy, and measure by audience segmentation. And the 4th piece, which has been the undeniable rise of retail media. Retail media is being dubbed as the 3rd wave of digital, and it's really an opportunity for brands to measure their in-store marketing efforts. Now, we're very much viewing very much seeing out-of-home as a primary media channel. But of course, when it comes to media planning and buying, there is very much a science there. I want to share this one slide with you. This one slide where, to be honest with you, there's another 4 or 5 hours we could be presenting to you the findings that come behind this slide. This has been pulled from our work with Analytic Partners, which shows, I guess the headline here is how hard out-of-home works when it's actually combined with TV, but also importantly with digital as well. So yes, we are a primary channel, but of course, when it comes to the mix of things, we know how well we can combine with other channels from the work that we've done here with Analytic Partners, which we can of course share with you. Now, today is very much about who we are, what we have, and how we innovate. But look, we very much see that the out-of-home sector as being something that is more than just an advertising channel. We very much see ourselves as playing an integral role in the communities in which we operate, creating engaging environments that very much inform, entertain, and inspire. And we really do feel that this is reflected within our purpose, that being, as I said on the screen here, to make public spaces better and brands unmissable. Now, this purpose, this vision is very much underpinned by the 3 pillars of our strategy. Now, the 3 strategic pillars that we have within our business are to lead out-of-home to a digital-first future, which again, you're going to hear more of, capture audience attention in public spaces at scale, and to make it easier for our customers to achieve better outcomes. Now, the way that manifests itself in terms of that conduit, how we actually engage with those audiences in this way, we're going to click through to our sizzle reel, which will spell it out a little bit harder now. Nice. Thanks, Ali. Oh, a repeat, a remix. So as you will have seen there on the screen, we all but have a shiny rectangle, no matter which direction you turn. We break that up in terms of digital and classic billboards, large format on the side of road. We also have street furniture. We have presence in retail precincts, both large and small format. We have strong presence across all major airports across the country, particularly through our association with Qantas and the Qantas lounges. We activate in rail. We activate across university campuses through our study network, and very much tapping into that CBD audience, that premium CBD audience through our office network as well. Our strategy, like I've said up front as well, very much leans into a digital-first future. While we're talking assets, we've seen the conversion of over 56 new or converted assets in terms of large format hit the ground in the last 12 months. That will continue to grow. As the calendar year unfolds. To give you a bit of a sense of the acceleration behind this, that's around about a 50% uplift in terms of our normal acceleration in terms of conversion of sites that we've seen over the last 12 months. So it is very much key and central to our direction in conversion of assets. Now, we've talked very much around the scale of the opportunity. I've touched ever so briefly around the creativity and data and how those pieces intersect with innovation. I'm actually now going to hand on to Ali now to go a little bit deeper in terms of data and creativity. Ali.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Hoping that I'm not on mute. No one's giving me a sign, so we're going to go that way. Good. You can all hear me. Yes, I am going to go into a bit more detail of how we actually make all of those rectangles, which is the earworm for me at the moment, is all the rectangles can really work for you from a data and creative point of view. And I'm going to start with something that I think I come back to a lot, and we definitely do in this business, is how we want to make sure that all brands can be top of mind as often as possible, because they're not all the time, as much as everyone in this room would like to think that they are. So what we want to do is, what we want to think about, what we're working on in that digital first future and making public spaces unmissable, is how do we make sure your brand is unmissable in all the ways it can at the best moments to get engagement across the day. So there's a couple ways to look at it. I'm going to start with the data piece, which once again, I could go on for hours and hours, but I won't, because we all have lunch to get to. But we're going to start on the data piece and thinking about what we have access to in terms of a data point of view, because over the years, out of home used to have very much an ABS or a census data, and we built a lot of our schedules around that because that's what was available. But we've moved into this really great sector where we can have transactional data available to us, which actually tells us a little bit about how different audiences are moving throughout their day. So in a very non-creepy way, if you think of your bank statement, that is audited and anonymized, promise, of what that's telling us from where you're purchasing, is it online or in store, what time of day, and where are you? It gives you kind of all of that information. So we can start to see where chocolate buyers are also interacting with cosmetic retailing, et cetera, et cetera. So having access to that level of detail, which is what we're getting from the Flybys and the Westpac data, gives us more information to plan on. So that stat on the left-hand side of the screen of that 2 times more is almost, I feel like, an expectation of if you have more going into what you're doing, you would hopefully get more out of it. And it turns out you do. So we want to use these behaviors to help achieve business objectives for everyone on this call of what are we trying to get to, and how are we trying to look at a certain buyer or a certain biographic, and how do we make them either continue the behavior or increase loyalty, for example. We can see challenger brands coming into a new category. There's a lot we can do thinking laterally about how we use people's behaviors as our input, if you will. So what we have with that Unpacked by Flybys and Westpac is over 800 segments. Now, I myself am a cheese buyer and a chocolate buyer. I must be hungry. I'm really leaning into food at the moment. But people are multiple things all the time. So once again, thinking about back to what are the objectives of the campaign and what we want people to do, we can really think about how we want them to act in that sense. And as we talked about with that scale piece, we have this information across all of our real estate, essentially. So all of those different formats that Tim talked about, we can look at it from this angle, once again, because of the level of the data, which is really cool. And I would nerd out on that, but not today. And then we can build schedules based on those audiences. So how are we making sure that we're taking those insights and planning it out? And I'll give you an example of spirit drinkers on the side, but I'll actually tell you a story of a good way that this has been used in a different way is out of WA, the Road Safety Commission wanted to do a drink driving campaign. And so what they did is we targeted people based on the transactional data who were frequenting dining out in pubs more often, as well as getting into proximity to those types of venues. And then we used the data, which I'll talk about in a second, to look at if rideshare went up over that campaign. So once again, we can look at total spirit buyers to get more people to buy into spirits. But coming back to your objective, are we trying to get total spirit buyers to get them to drink more beer or a certain type of wine? Those are conversations we want to be having with you guys all the time. And it's a very cool and exciting place for us. The other part of that, what that transactional data is giving us is not only that planning and that buying part, which I just talked to, is we can plan to those audiences, but really excitingly, we also have the ability to measure it. So once again, if we have sales data off the back of the campaign, we can actually see, did sales go up, did the category go up, what's happening in that dynamic. And actually, we've been working with Flybuys and Westpac for over a year now. We have over 100 studies available in that measurement piece, which allows us to start asking questions about what's the best way to flight campaigns based on objectives. What are we trying to do for different brands? What are kind of lookalikes in terms of objective and budget? And what's the results that we're getting with different formats? So it's a really cool place to be in terms of that. It's an example that we did for UE. But what you can start to see is increase in number of buyers during a campaign period. So that's looking at your media buy as a whole. So we would like to think and do think that out of home is contributing to that. But how do we get those buyers and how do we make sure that that's working in well with retail or digital, or what's the flighting of that? We can also see things like brand penetration, which I think is really the brand penetration and the market share that we can see out of this data is really where the rubber hits the road for me, because we can see increase in sales, increase in buyers for the brand, but what's happening in the context of the category. And we can look at that during that time over that campaign period. So brand penetration is a really cool thing to look at. And of course, something that I think is really interesting is new buyers to the brand. So once again, coming back to objective, we're trying to get like category buyers to think about your brand more often, or are we trying to get people who are in the brand to switch to, or in the category to switch to your brand? And those kind of questions, and if we're really trying to achieve that, we now have the data to see what's working and what's not and learn from it. So maybe it's a little bit if we have a metro only campaign, but we know some of your buyers are in regional areas, for example. So then we would look at planning the next campaign differently. So we're on a test and learn journey with this, and we really hope to work with you guys to see more of these come to life and also use the learnings that we have holistically to help campaigns. The other great thing, and this is definitely from Georgie will get into this in a second, but also the network that we're playing in, especially from a Flybuys point of view. So this is the ecosystem of the Unpacked by Flybuys network. And I think there's two parts that's really cool about this. One, that we're playing in this very digital network. We like being a part of it. It means that you can take that total spirits buyer and plan it against all of those other icons on platforms on the screen. But I think also the other part of it is we're really excited to be the broadcast, essentially the best broadcast at piece of this ecosystem. So if you need to amplify messaging, if you need to make sure we're getting those buyers at scale, we're the really great, easy answer to that. So if you're using Flybuys across these networks, you can definitely really easily use them in out of home too, which is a very exciting. And once again, that digital first future, this is a big step in that direction, is how do we play in those ecosystems to complement strategies in that place. I'm going to turn creative into a data stat. So you're welcome, everybody. Data nerd talking creative here. But the other stat that I really love this, and we'll talk about it quite extensively, is that 41% of out of home being driven by creative. And as Tim mentioned at the top, we have a whole new study with analytic partners looking at this, and creative is definitely a part of it because we know it has such an impact on what we're doing. And so the experts that we have in our business in Poly really make that creative innovation and making sure everything from little things you can be doing to really optimize your creative from a creative point of view, all the way up to big, cool, very brand fame types of things. They're definitely here and have been really getting some momentum in the last 12 months. Now, of course, we talked about fame being really a driver of out of home. And we've even seen this in the newest analytic partners coming out of that brand building. That fame is something that out of home very naturally is good at. And you don't even need $150 million into your ad campaign to make this happen. But it is something that we like to ideate on. What are big ideas? How can we be bigger than we are? And I think that's a really strategic idea from our point of view to build fame and make sure that we're coming back to it. But the other part that we can play with, and we're playing more in this, is on a campaign. If you don't have $150 million as your marketing budget, what can we do to tie into other strategies that are already available? And a really good example of this we did with Dulux when Taylor Swift came to town in March. And what we did is we partnered with Nova, and every time they changed to a Taylor Swift song, Enchanted, for example, that played on Nova, all the screens updated, and we had this creative that actually said the name of the paint color, if you will, aligned to what was playing on Nova. And then it switched over when Karma played, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a really clever use of digital triggers that aligned to another medium, aligned to what was happening online, that was executed very, very well. So it doesn't have to be Barbie. We can do different things for different brands, and we're really up for that conversation because we want to propel that forward. And there are many, many, many other examples of how we can look at offline to online and online to offline. But I think the easiest and best one that we've seen before is what we're calling the lift and shift. And so I'm going to play this. I think it has music, so I will pause for a second. But the idea of this is social creative done by L'Oreal that we're amplifying through all of our full motion network. So I'll play it real quick and then I'll keep talking. Beautiful. I don't know if we needed sound on that, but we had it. But the big thing for me for lift and shift is the efficiencies that we now have when we're talking about digital into out of home. So when we're talking about creative, don't need your own out of home specs. It works if it's portrait. We have over 5,000 screens that can play digital creative full motion. So anything that has video, which we know works better in those environments, you can really amplify that message really, really easily, lift and shift, if you will. So that's something that we want to make sure it gets easier as we go. And I think we have the tech to support it. Georgie will talk a little bit about it also with a programmatic sense. But I think that's something that we can keep having conversations about to make that synergy, if you will, work harder for you. The other thing about it, you don't, not everybody has to do a 3DA execution on the Burke, or if we're using Yagan Square. We're also bringing that innovation. We're always thinking about how do we scale things and make things easier. And we know that there are thousands of specs that live within out of home generally, but we want to try and make it so simple for you guys from a creative aspect. So how do we get templates going? How do we make sure we can do really cool things? Once again, using full motion environment when they come to life. So whether that's airports or office or rail, what can we do to make sure that that's coming to life in a really cool way? And I think going forward, it'd be awesome. This is my goal and dream, is in a retail center, if you go around a panel, people actually give space for the creative because they're just so used to it that it's popping out at them. It might be a pipe dream, but I'm really hoping it's going to happen. And then the last part to that poly piece is we know everyone's on their own journey. There are different clients that are also on this journey. So I think where we really understand is there that education of how do you use all the rectangle canvases? How can we really make that pop? And not to say what to do with the creative, but how do you optimize creative for out of home? How do you make things simple? How do you make things colorful? What really works? And we have different sessions that we can do with creative agencies, with clients, with media in that space. And then we also have that inspiration pace. What's happening across the world, like faux out of home, for example, that's really giving rise, and what can we do to really inspire? So we play in both sides really easily with the team, and we have sessions that we can do for both that are really, really cool, very, very easy to execute. So if that's of interest, please let us know because we're very interested in doing them. It's a really, really fun. Every single one of those is really fun. So now I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. So that's kind of what we are and how we're innovating kind of in a broad sense, if you will. I want to give a couple examples of the executional part of it, of how we're looking at audiences within our networks, and then, of course, hand over to Georgie for how we can continue to innovate and how we're buying. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about enterprise, which is our office and our fly network. So airports and office, if you will. And that's really guided, these networks for a long time have really been guided by the professional. which looking around the screens at all of us, like we are all professionals. So how can we make sure we're tapping into this group as they're moving around their day? And I think that's a really important piece, is it's thinking about the day, not just on their way home or coming from home, what's happening during that day and how do we really tap into that? The nice part about it, especially for that business professional, once again, us, how are we really reaching them across that full journey, and what can we do, and what are those touch points? And not even what are those touch points, but how are we talking a little bit differently with those brand cues across those different touch points? Because there's a lot of great dwell time in there that really syncs up with digital aspects as well. So whether that's, if we're thinking about office screens as people are going up and down the lift every day, or if you're sitting in the lounge, or even more, you're literally strapped to a chair and in flight to have to watch. What can we do to really make those stand out? And once again, these are conversations we want to be having with you guys. And the other part that we're trying to do is we want to put data into everything, not only because I love it, but because we know it's really important as a business. So we have different aspects. So once again, we just did the professional perspective, which was a survey that we did of business professionals to see what's actually changed in the last 3 years. And I won't say what the obvious one of what's changed, but how does that change behavior, and how do we make sure that we're still engaging with that right audience? So thinking even about going to the office and that flexibility that's now more built in than it ever has before, especially for the business professional. We asked the question, how often do you go in? And seeing that it's 3.5 days. So it doesn't always have to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some businesses are different, but even having that as part of what we're trying to do from a planning point of view, and how we get that frequency up still while you're building reach in that office environment in different areas. So we have insights of that, of kind of what are those behaviors that are happening. And then also, how do we really tap it in for different types of brands? So what's happening from an auto point of view in that mindset of the professional versus shopping or luxury shopping? What are those behaviors that we can start to see that we can actually use to make sure that we're planning appropriately? So for example, shopping on a weekday is much preferable than shopping on a weekend is a really good retail insight that we can use because we're in the CBDs across the country from an office point of view. So we have a lot of little tidbits like that that we'd love to share with you guys and talk more about getting into this audience and getting into the mindset of them. And just to go over what we have in terms of that office, it's a national offering. It's uniform across across the country as well. So full motion capabilities are there. And it's a really uncluttered environment that we like to talk lots about. And then from a fly point of view, you still have that national coverage, especially in that ESB. And then, as most people on this call know, we have a really great longstanding partnership with Qantas. So what can we do to really amplify that for different brands and brand objectives and really get that elevation, which once again, we're seeing from other pieces of data is really working from that brand. The last part I'm going to talk about innovation in fly is just because I think it's really cool, but this is coming very, very soon. This is coming into the Melbourne airport. So if you think international terminals, for anyone who's done it, when you get off the plane, you're going to walk through our immersive welcome wall, which is going to be awesome in terms of what it's going to do from a welcoming point of view. The words from Melbourne Airport is that they want to do things that puts Melbourne on the map. So being overwhelmed by brands as you're walking off a flight, I think will be pretty effective. So these types of things we want to keep you apprised of as they're coming, because they're coming all the time, not just in fly, but in office as well. So let us know if we can do that and really capture this audience from a professional perspective. And now I'm going to hand over to Georgie to talk about Pragmatic.
Thanks, Ellie. Straight into the next slide, please. So firstly, I'm sure you guys have all heard a lot about programmatic out-of-home growth over the last few years, but really wanting to kind of put that into context as it pertains to the wider digital out-of-home landscape. So last year within Australia, for participants within the OMA, programmatic made up around 2.5% in January per month of digital revenue, where by the end of the year was growing to around 5%. This year we've started at 6% and already edging towards that 8%. So the growth is really there, and I think it's really, really exciting for both out of home and for the digital landscape and the wider omni-channel programmatic ecosystem. So really exciting place to be and is that sort of physical intersection of the digital and programmatic world. So from an oOh perspective, we actually now have 5 people within our programmatic team. oOh does have over 200 salespeople, so we are small and mighty compared to the wider sales team, but we're growing and we're also working to look how we can further embed with the traditional sales team so that we are empowering our salespeople to be able to sell across sort of all mediums, which is really fantastic. We have over 3,500 assets that can be traded programmatically. And where we are available programmatically, we do have a guaranteed slot on the loop. So I think that's really important to note. It's not PG for anyone wondering. It is all bought non-guaranteed, but there is a guaranteed place for programmatic in any loop that programmatic is made available on. So it's not what has been unsold in other areas, which is really premium supply we have access to. So we're across billboard, retail, office, rail, street, and very excitingly now fly, which I will touch on shortly. So we are really evolving our offering, as this time last year we were probably available on around 1,200 panels. So the growth trajectory is there, not only from a supply perspective, but from a market perspective. Next slide, Ellie. So wanting to sort of touch on where we see programmatic as oOh, in some ways, I don't want to pigeonhole it to these use cases, because as you guys know, and I'm sure there's a lot of digital agencies on there, you can be running in any circumstance you like all day, all week across the panels that we can be bought on. But there really is that flexibility associated with programmatic. And that's how we often see programmatic being used to complement a traditional activation. We'll often see a traditional laydown across, our classic panels or digital panels across a certain period of time, and then a tactical element that might be across certain days of the week, times of day. It may be enabled based on certain weather triggers, such as pollen or, certain degrees a certain creative will show, etc. And advertisers are really able to take advantage of that agility as well. So, owning a moment, whether it be, for example, as we talked about Taylor Swift in town, you might want to be around the proximity of certain locations only across those couple of days the concert was, running. So there really opportunities are endless, but we do see programmatic really, really complementing the wider out-of-home piece, and it's really evolving in terms of the creative use cases that we are seeing. Next slide, Ali. So this is really exciting and was no easy feat. I'm relatively new to out of home, and I was extremely shocked at just how intricate some of these setups are. So it took many months, but we are now live across Fly, which is really, really exciting. So from a programmatic perspective, we are live across Newcastle, Darwin, Melbourne and Brisbane airports in both departures and arrivals. And as Ali mentioned, this complements our wider enterprise offering. So we see this as a really big opportunity to utilise some of that inherent programmatic capability. Melbourne, for example, has, a ton of sporting events or, cultural events, whether it's F1, Australian Open, etc., where people can be really owning that moment, looking at flight schedules, targeting certain routes that, that the audience that you're looking for is going to be within the airport at that time. We are across both international and domestic, which is really interesting from an audience perspective. And that professional perspective study did give us some really unique insight into the different ways we can be targeting, the business traveller from a domestic perspective all week, and then looking at the different nationalities and flight times we might be seeing, and the state of mind people are in when traveling internationally. So really exciting evolution to our wider Fly offering and to our programmatic offering. Another very exciting piece that we have in the works, currently, if you're buying from oOh from a programmatic perspective, it is all via PMP as self-serve. We do have a very small amount of our inventory also available on the Open Exchange, but predominantly it's PMP only and all self-serve. So it does require our clients to be utilising a DSP themselves to be running activity. We are very, very close to being able to offer a programmatic managed service. And I think this is going to be really exciting for those that don't necessarily have in-house programmatic traders or capability resource. So what we're going to be able to do is offer end-to-end campaign management and service from my team within oOh. So that should be coming later this quarter. So if that is of interest, definitely get in touch and we will share with you when we are available. But really part of this is also just wanting to make sure that we are making ourselves easy to trade, removing any sort of barriers to access. And, you know, programmatic does provide for that in terms of the low barriers to entry from a cost perspective. Our PMPs, there's no minimum spend at all. We do have a minimum spend for our managed service as 5K. However, that is, you know, significantly potentially more accessible for some of the smaller budgets that people may have. So great for those dipping their toes in, or for campaigns that you may not have traditionally thought of including out of home on. Next one, Ali. And yeah, finally for me, we're certainly not stopping. We've evolved our offering, and our team has grown, you know, a lot in the last 8 or 9 months, but we are still on this evolution. The wider programmatic ecosystem is growing and developing. Programmatic out of home, you know, is still on that maturity curve, and there's a lot of exciting things happening within the SSPs and DSPs in terms of capability that is going to be further enriching what we can do. But we at oOh are also looking to further evolve our offering. So we're looking at, you know, how we could potentially support DCO for programmatic, whether there's other ways that we can be utilising Poly, which Ali touched on earlier, and how we can be really creative in how we utilise creative within programmatic. We're nearly there from an inventory perspective. We do not currently have our university inventory available programmatically. So, you know, just another example of where we are looking to make all inventory that can be available, but also as oOh onboards new assets, wanting to make sure that what can be traded is able to be traded programmatically. And further looking at how we are making ourselves available. So managed service is a really good example of that, but also from an open exchange perspective, right now our office is available as well as our street furniture, but continuing to evolve as a business and, you know, really look at whether there are other formats that can be made available, looking at, you know, just making sure that from a trading perspective, we are meeting the market needs and evolving with what our clients are looking to do. That's all from me. So I'm going to pass back to Tim.
Great. Thank you very much, Georgie. Thank you, Ali. And again, thank you, everyone. I think we've probably, look, we've touched on a lot of pieces here. We've given you a lot of things to think about when it comes to out of home. We've given you a lot of things to think about in terms of engaging with out of home. We've spoken a lot about audience, objectives, budget levels, and access to audiences through those budgets. I think pretty much where we sort of want to move to now, though, is to throw open to anyone on the call at the moment to see if anyone has any questions. Sam, I can't actually see a chat from where I am, but wanted to see if there was any questions that anyone had along the way. Otherwise, if there isn't, of course, we are here available and ready to take your call.
Nothing in the chat. Are there any questions, guys? And it appears not. Tim, we can connect anyone through to you guys who's question afterwards. Thank you, members, for tuning in today. Once again, a couple of weeks' time, we're in Brisbane. Don't forget to get involved with the IMAA Academy. Digital's now out. And Pitchella, 2 more hours before we close that down. We've got some amazing agencies who already put their hands up. I think there's like 78 already in there. So we can't wait for this. It's going to be our biggest event for the first half of FY25. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, oOh. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Georgie. And talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.